Over the last stretch of Donald Trump's candidacy for president, no one was a bigger cheerleader for him than Elon Musk.
America's just not just going to be great. America is going to reach heights that it has never seen before. The future is going to be amazing!
Aside from stumping for Trump on the campaign trail for weeks, the tech magnate also poured millions into Trump's election campaign. Musk also used his social media company X as a pulpit to promote his preferred candidate, often with claims that were untrue.
It's still a very powerful platform. It's still the platform many celebrities and politicians and so many people use to make official announcements and talk directly to people. So it is a real hub and source of news, and he basically turned that into Trump's favor.
The admiration went both ways. Here is Donald Trump praising Musk during his speech declaring victory in the 2024 presidential election.
We have a new star. A star is born, Elon.
Trump's imminent presidency is paying off for Musk, who is already the richest man in the world, even before Trump steps into the White House on January 20th. In the week after the election was called for Donald Trump, Tesla stock surged, with shares of the company reaching their highest level since 2022. The company's market capitalization is now over $1 trillion.
A lot of analysts are going to look at the Trump presidency as a very positive thing for Tesla because they just see Musk's influence over the incoming administration can streamline things that Tesla wants permission to do.
With the election of Donald Trump to a second presidential term and the appointment of Elon Musk as a head of a new government efficiency commission known as DOGE, CNBC wanted to learn how Musk and his myriad of companies may benefit from having the year of the president.
Just as a call out, it's really amusing from my own perspective that basically he came up with an acronym. I assume he had to have come up with an acronym, like a backronym situation where he came up with the word he wanted to make out of the acronym and then went backwards. Just for folks who don't know, there's a Doge coin, and I'm pretty sure Elon has highlighted it previously as something that he's interested in. I'm not sure whether he does it jokingly or seriously. But I would have to guess he's doing this sort of as like an inside joke to himself of referencing Dogecoin in some way for the Department of Government Efficiency, I think is the actual phrase. But as they're about to get into it, it is very suspicious on how things will be handled fairly in a world where there are multiple entrepreneurs potentially acting as part of the government, and that they can adjust regulations. It could be good, it could be bad, but I do think that there's an inherent conflict of interest there, one way or the other. Like for Elon, I'm sure they're about to cover it right now, but technically speaking, there's a bunch of ways that things are regulated today that I'm sure he is impacted by. He's even highlighted his dissatisfaction with regulation in some areas. I'm sure between Tesla and SpaceX, he has had to deal with a number of regulations that are coming into play there on like how safe vehicles are, what you're able to do with certain resources, etc. And so he obviously has a vested interest in streamlining whatever path is in his way and potentially even making it difficult for the pathways that his competitors are going down. So like an example could be he reduces regulation on things like electric vehicles, for instance, which is predominantly what Tesla has. And then they could add a bunch of overhead for non-electric vehicles. And then this could give him a huge edge in the market that he can artificially create himself. That's obviously like a blatant way of him going after this. But one of the hardest parts is going to be able to figure out where is the line between what is generally good for the market and where is he kind of making changes to gain personally from what he's doing. Also, I just noticed that they have, it wasn't in the title, but they have efficiency czar here. I'm not sure what prompted this, but I feel like there's so many czars under Trump. I don't recall us ever calling anybody a czar previously under other presidents, but maybe I'm just misinformed. But I feel like everybody's a czar of something now. I'm not sure if this is meant to be derogatory of some way, but it's interesting to see that they are being so prevalent with this phrasing for Trump's team and his cabinet member. Um, Usually, I think it just means somebody who's like an authority figure, basically like a ruler of some sort. So I guess it's not incorrect as a pure definition, but it's curious to me that it's only being used in this connotation for these individuals, and it feels like some type of propaganda of these individuals maybe having either too much power or unjust power or something like that. I'm not really sure. If any of you know why they keep using this word all of a sudden for Trump's like cabinet members and his team that he's bringing in, feel free to post it in the comments. I'm happy to learn more about it.
Elon Musk's business empire is sprawling and includes EV maker Tesla, social media company X, artificial intelligence startup xAI, computer interface company Neuralink, tunneling venture Boring Company, and aerospace firm SpaceX. Some of these companies already benefit tremendously from federal contracts.
SpaceX has already earned more than $19 billion from its prime contracts with the government. Most of that business is coming from contracts with NASA and the Department of Defense, including like Space Force, Air Force, and others. Sometimes it's NOAA. But the federal government in the US is very, very reliant on SpaceX to go ahead with its launches, to put new satellites up for their various purposes, be it defense, be it environmental, and communications.
Abroad, the US government has been paying SpaceX millions to make its Starlink satellite internet available in Ukraine. The company is also working on a military version of Starlink called Starshield for the Department of Defense. This vast reliance on SpaceX has caused some of SpaceX's rivals to object. In 2021, Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin sued and eventually lost a case where the company argued that NASA had unfairly chosen SpaceX as the sole winner of a contract to develop a lunar lander for NASA's Artemis missions. NASA has since also contracted with Blue Origin for the task. Still, with a favorable president on his side, it's not hard to imagine Elon Musk's SpaceX winning even more of these lucrative government contracts in the future.
Quickly continue on that, I just thought that was an interesting point where Jeff Bezos and Amazon basically just sued NASA for not picking them, and it got them to be picked the next time. So this is an unfortunate portion, not obviously not the main part of this segment, but just thought it was worth calling out of how unfortunate it is that some companies kind of use lawsuits aggressively in order to get their way, even if the lawsuit itself, arguably the fact that they lost that lawsuit means that like there was no validity to that argument that they were making, and they didn't get anything that showed that NASA was biased or doing anything against Amazon. But then they chose Amazon for their next project, so that way they theoretically wouldn't be sued again, is the assumption here. And this is something that, while not specific again to this conversation, I do hope we do, as a society and as a government, and maybe the US more broadly speaking, put in some regulation for that phenomenon. I feel like this happens across so many industries where there's sort of like patent trolls or other legal trolls that exist, and basically they just sue other individuals to prevent competition from happening. And I feel like this is sort of a unspoken portion of like a monopoly that we don't really discuss all that often. But there's an example of, I know one that comes to my mind immediately is like Disney or Nintendo, for instance. I think they're classic examples of individuals who have a lot of patents, and they basically just sue anybody and everybody who gets in their way, or they try like lobbying to get things changed such that they can like maintain their monopoly in certain areas. And so obviously Amazon is doing this here, and I'm sure a number of companies do it, and there might be better examples out there, but it seems to become too prevalent where once you are such a big company, it's so easy to spend your resources and your money just messing with the little guy or somebody who's infringing on you, which is, in my mind, counter to having our capitalistic society where competition should generally be fair, and it should just be the best product wins, in my opinion, or the best service wins. And that these things that people do to try to impede others from infringing on their monopoly or their advantage that they have, I feel like goes against what we should be doing as part of our economy and our society. And so, completely off topic, But I figured it was worth calling out because they just very quickly went over that and how Amazon basically got away with it and then gained benefits from this sort of frivolous lawsuit that they made against NASA.
As the concerns about, a monopolistic relationship grow within that federal government, Trump isn't likely to slow it down. SpaceX is likely to earn out more than $5 billion a year over the next several years from federal contracts they've already kind of got locked down, and that could even grow.
During his victory speech, Trump marveled at SpaceX's ability to retrieve the rocket booster of its massive Starship rocket and praised Musk for delivering Starlink Wi-Fi terminals to North Carolina following Hurricane Helene.
To be fair to Trump, them catching that rocket was pretty awesome. I gotta say, for myself personally, that is pretty cool just to see from an engineering effort that they are doing such cool projects. So, and at some point, some of this has to be Elon actually doing good work in some areas, though I'm sure there is favoritism from Trump, obviously, since he picked him as part of his, I think, cabinet member. So clearly this is where there is going to be favoritism, but also at the same time, presumably based off of the title of this video, they're going to be pretty anti-Elon Musk and anti-Elon as part of the government. But I think it would be unfair to say anything and everything that Elon has done has been negative and or due to some unfair competition that he has. Obviously, Tesla was a great push for electric vehicles, and I think it pushed the industry forward. I don't know if I would consider them the leader anymore, but I think them kind of coming out of the blue and getting ahead of all of the big names that existed at that time, and that sort of pushed them to go forward. And I feel like SpaceX is similar of they're still pushing there, they're still trying to differentiate themselves, and they're getting a lot of attention for it, but they certainly put in a lot of effort to get to where they are now, and certainly it can't just all be, it's not 100% nepotism or something like that or luck. Clearly they're doing some stuff that's actually pretty good.
It was very dangerous. People would die. They had no communication. All the wires went down. I called Elon Musk. I said, Elon, you have something called Starlink. Is that right? Yes, I do. What the hell is it? He said, it's a communication system that's very good. I said, Elon, they need it really, really badly in North Carolina. Can you get it? He had that there so fast. It was incredible.
Tesla has also benefited greatly from government support, mostly by taking advantage of existing EV policies like automotive regulatory credits, which are issued to companies that make low-carbon or no-carbon emission vehicles. Regulatory credits made up about 60% of Tesla's net income in the second quarter of 2024, and about 39% in the third quarter. In total, the company has reported about $10 billion in sales of environmental credits since 2015. While Trump has often promised to dismantle existing green energy subsidies and programs, he may not have the authority to single-handedly dismantle carbon credits, as many carbon credit markets are state-run. In addition, many clean energy projects enjoy bipartisan support.
80% of the funding from the president's signature bills, the Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, have gone to red districts, districts represented by Republicans. It would be political malpractice to undo those opportunities.
Where Trump may have more power is nixing electric vehicle tax credits, offered to those who purchase EVs, and eliminating grants for the build-out of electric vehicle charging.
Yeah, so this is an interesting segment, again, where they sort of highlighted how much Elon Musk is benefiting from these tax credits that exist and these incentives that exist for electric vehicles. And I think personally that's just a sign of a good entrepreneur. I think seeing that the government is pushing for a particular area or a particular technology and using that to support that industry and you trying to be an incumbent in that industry and taking advantage of that. If those didn't exist and he didn't do that, likely Tesla wouldn't exist as it does today. Obviously, if you took out 60% of their revenue, they might not have been able to get to where they are now or made the push for electric vehicles that they did. And so, again, it feels fairly disingenuous to kind of use this. And here they're actually highlighting the fact that Elon Musk is okay with them removing some of these tax credits. And since I said a lot of things potentially defending Elon Musk in this segment, I want to at least highlight why I think that's okay. And my rationale around it is because this has been done by so many companies, and there's a good chance that those companies were probably also called out for it during those times. But there's a lot of big companies that we know of today that gained from uh, government funds in some way or government support in some way. Some examples would be the internet. The internet was basically, I think that was a government project that was created. I think it was ARPANET, if I'm recalling correctly. And so they needed a way to try to communicate with folks. I think this might have been back in the Cold War. I might be misremembering entirely, so feel free to correct me on any of this. And so I think they were worried about ways of communicating with other individuals and like worrying about like the impacts of it. It could have been a different war, but I think that was one of the primary reasons. They also looked into things like the government made GPS. I think likely for military applications as well, and then it became broadly used by other systems and is how we get a lot of things today, like air travel or routing through Google Maps or things like Uber or things like that would only really exist with that functionality existing. And there's also other ways of more direct usage of this. Like, I think there's a variety of companies that leverage, I think, World War II, if I'm not mistaken, funds, such as, I think, like the Lay's company used it as they were one of the companies that was able to help generate high caloric food at the time, which was seen as a good thing during the war to basically be able to replenish energy for soldiers while they were out. I think it might have been the Mars company as well, and or Hershey. One of the chocolate companies I think was in the same boat where literally they just got a government contract that I think made them the monopoly, so to speak, or the only individual that had full rights to service some of those aspects, and then they just pumped out goods in that time, and then that basically carried them through till today. And they're huge, huge companies that we all see as staples in our everyday lives, and they 100% took advantage of a need that the government had. And if they didn't, those companies might not exist today. And so I just wanted to explain that a little bit, which is the same way I don't think of Lay's or chocolate companies being evil or nefarious in some way because they're using government funds. I would say that's my rationale for Tesla as well, is because it's something that the government needed, like in this case of electric vehicles. We have been wanting to reduce carbon emissions for years now, and that's why those credits exist and those incentives exist, is to help push society forward to reduce carbon emissions. And there was an entrepreneur, in this case, Elon Musk, who was trying to take advantage of that and leverage that to help his business and also help further that agenda, which I think was a net positive.
Which Tesla has also benefited from. In a post on X in July, Musk was adamant that Tesla doesn't need subsidies and that removing them would only help the company. Some industry insiders agree.
At the end of the day, Tesla is the best position versus all the automakers, including the legacy automakers on EVs. You know, they have the biggest scale, they have the lowest cost, they have the highest margins to withstand an environment where, let's say, Trump pulls a majority of the incentives.
Musk and Tesla are now focused on autonomy and bringing robotaxis to market, a goal that still seems years away.
Tesla's still really grappling with development of that technology. They have never made a vehicle that's safe to drive without a human at the wheel ready to steer a brake at all times in an uncontrolled environment like the public roads.
The Trump team is reportedly planning to prioritize federal regulations around self-driving vehicles in the US, which would be a boon for Tesla.
So that makes sense. I think definitely I'm personally interested in self-driving cars. I hope that they don't ease rules that make it dangerous for individuals. I think during a previous segment, we had seen how US added a lot of regulation to ensure safety within autonomous vehicle features. And this is not true in other countries. I think they were comparing it to China in that case. And they were highlighting how many more accidents those companies have with their cars because they have less regulation around them and they have less practice around it. So I do think having the regulation there did help those features get to a high quality when they're released, and I think that is very important. Also, in the previous example, I think that was a great example of how things could be negatively impacted for other folks. So they covered that one quickly, which I thought was one of their best arguments against Elon Musk being part of the government, is he was okay with reducing the subsidies for electric vehicles. And the reason why this is potentially bad is because I think exactly what that individual had highlighted very quickly, which is competition is going to be one of the things that can be stifled by this. So the same way that Tesla was able to enter the market and then take advantage of these subsidies and these credits, etc., helped them kind of offset maybe a poor business model and or research and development that they need to get up and set up and get into the market originally. And now they're kind of at a scale where they likely can live with less and less of this as they can start streamlining their operations. They can really focus on profitability. But if there's a new incumbent here who doesn't have all that R&D, doesn't have all that infrastructure set up, it's going to be much more costly for them to try to make an electric vehicle at this point in time. And so by Elon Musk actually removing those, they would actually make it harder for new companies to come out of the blue and enter into the electric vehicle segment. So this is where he sort of has an edge now because he took advantage of those incentives. And now he's kind of trying to like burn the bridge behind him after he's crossed it. And that is potentially problematic. But again, I think those incentives had always been kind of slowly reduced over time. I think the entire idea behind them was to really push for when those vehicles were very expensive and unrealistic for standard consumption and purchasing. And as they get more and more realistic in value, they've sort of declined them over time. And so this has also been true for like solar panels for houses, etc. Those tax credits, etc., have been getting smaller and smaller as time goes on. And that's exactly what the expectation was. So it's not too large of a deal in so much as I think this was the expectation, is that they were going to slowly dwindle over time and then they would eventually be erased. But I do think this is an example of where Elon can push his own agenda and do something that's kind of in this gray area where he can basically make it harder for incumbents to compete with Tesla by removing that program. I just found it funny again because they just highlighted their like little agenda as they highlighted, and again China came up. This has been such a hot topic for CNBC lately. I'm not sure again why it feels like I feel like 50-60% of their videos there's some China callback where they're referencing how China is impacting the space. So we'll see what they have to say about it, but I'm finding it quite odd at this point at how prevalently they're kind of pushing this China versus America agenda. And I don't know if that's good for us, generally speaking. I do think this is a common news tactic where you sort of push something that is divisive, and then that will get you more attention. Not to say that there isn't actual strain between US and China and that there is some competition there, but it feels unnecessary to me. Maybe I'm underestimating the level of competition it's at and the seriousness of China, and US relations at this point in time. But it feels like this is sort of like a self-fulfilling prophecy where if our news outlets keep pushing this narrative of it's us versus China, then people are going to believe it more and more, and that can escalate the situation. And I feel like they are maybe doing a disservice to us as the viewers by potentially pushing this narrative so heavily that it might be forcing us down this road, even if it's potentially avoidable otherwise.
But Trump did make it official late last night that Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy will co-lead what he's calling the Department of Government Efficiency. Trump said that their goal will be to, and this is a direct quote here, dismantle government bureaucracy, lash excess regulations, cut wasteful expenditures, and restructure federal agencies. Now, guys, many questions about how exactly any of that would work, starting with that the president-elect cannot just create a new agency without Congress, which approves all spending. But Trump did say a little bit in his statement announcing it that Musk and Ramaswamy will work from outside of government in partnership with the Office of Management and Budget. That setup will not require either one of them to divest anything, to pass a background check, or to get Senate confirmation.
Even as an advisor, the position could be a powerful boost to Musk's business interests.
The number one way Elon Musk and his companies would benefit from a Trump administration is through deregulation and defanging, giving fewer resources to federal agencies tasked with oversight of him and his businesses.
As head of the Government Efficiency Commission, Musk has said that he plans to shave off a significant amount of dollars from the federal budget.
We set up Doge.
Yes.
How much do you think we can rip out of this wasted $6.5 trillion Harris-Biden budget?
Well, I think we could do at least $2 trillion.
Yeah!
For context, in 2023, the federal government budget was $6.1 trillion, with the largest chunks of the budget going to entitlement programs, including Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. On X, Musk suggests that one way to rein in the budget is to get rid of the fraud affecting some government programs. Data from the Government Accountability Office shows that the federal government lost an estimated $233 to $521 billion annually due to fraud between 2018 and 2022. Musk has also suggested that he will consolidate some of the country's over.
So again, just to call out those numbers, those were some pretty big numbers overall, but just wanted to go back to here. This is also, I believe, cumulative, if I'm not mistaken here. So they basically said 233 billion to 521 billion from 2018 through 2022. So basically like a 4 or 5 year span, depending on how they're doing this. So this is saying that they're basically losing 50 to 100 billion a year, or out of the 6 trillion that they have. And so that's not too large in my mind overall, just because that's like probably like a couple percent of their overall budget. Now, obviously, we hear that number, that's a huge number. Obviously, if any of us had 233 billion or 500 billion, that's a lot of money and that could do a lot of things. But I think once you're thinking at that scale of trillions of dollars, once you're losing a fraction of a trillion, because basically you're losing like a tenth of a trillion a year is basically what they're highlighting here, or less. And so we're really talking like 1-2%, I believe, if I'm doing my math correctly, of their budget is lost to fraud, which isn't that much, I would have to say, in the grand scheme of things. Like, especially considering how many programs they have, how many people are impacted by these things. Losing less than probably 2 or 3% a year due to fraud seems reasonable. I would have to look into how these numbers work out, but I would assume like credit card companies probably also have to deal with fraud, and they must expect some small fractional portion of all of their transactions to be fraudulent. And so I would hope that it's a small percentage, but this isn't. If this was like 500 billion a year, I think that would be different. 500 billion over 4 to 5 years sounds pretty reasonable to me, considering the rest of their budget is in the trillions.
Fraud between 2018 and 2022. Musk has also suggested that he will consolidate some of the country's over 400 federal agencies.
Oh yeah, and the other point that I think is worth calling out. So he also highlighted in that previous video that he thinks he can cut the spending by 2 trillion, and that he highlighted fraud as one of the main reasons. So again, if he thinks he can pull out 2-ish trillion, realistically, they just highlighted that there's only about 100 billion worth of fraud that they believe currently exists. So even if they're off by like a magnitude, they're still maybe at 1 trillion or less, even if they're like a tenth of what they expect. So he would still have to be expecting the majority of that $2 trillion savings to come from other places. So that seems disingenuous to me, but also, again, this seems to be like an anti-Musk video, so it's possible they took some of those things out of context to make that narrative. But again, fraud is unlikely going to save the government $2 trillion a year, since there's already investigation showing that it wasn't even 1 trillion over the course of multiple years.
I think there's something like 428 federal agencies. That's almost 2 agencies per year since the founding of the country, and more being created. And so I call this like a sort of strangulation by overregulation. And this is crazy.
In a recent commentary piece in the Wall Street Journal, Musk and Ramaswamy wrote that Doge will pursue 3 major kinds of reform: regulatory rescissions, administrative reductions, and cost savings. The commentary went on to say that many existing federal regulations were never passed by Congress and should therefore be nullified, which President-elect Trump will be able to do by executive action. Meanwhile, cutting expenditures like the $535 million a year that goes to the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, $1.5 billion for grants to international organizations, and nearly $300 million to groups like Planned Parenthood could deliver major cost savings, they said. The two also championed the large-scale auditing of agencies, calling out the Pentagon for failing its 7th consecutive audit.
Musk here.
Yeah, so again, I feel like this is a classic tactic that I see. I do generally enjoy these videos, which is why I react to these so frequently, is I think that there's a lot of good information and they do generally try to add it in. But I feel like there's a lot of coercing, I would say, as part of their data and how they present it, which is, again, they just previously highlighted the fact that fraud was what they sort of showed as maybe his primary example of why he thought he could save $2 trillion a year. And then this last example, they highlighted the fact that basically he's going to save money through getting rid of basically $500 billion in annual expenditures through a variety of systems. So that's already a quarter of his $2 trillion that he's looking to save a year. And so this is a far larger segment. So they even have this exact document, which they obviously had when they made this segment. And so they seem to highlight fraud, even though that was maybe $500 billion over 4 or 5 years. And this one is highlighting how he plans to save $500 billion a year going forward. Now that's separate on whether or not I agree or disagree with whether he's going to do the right thing here and whether or not these are appropriate spending or not. But again, I think just from a mathematical standpoint, they seem to have led with an example that seemed to highlight maybe 50 to 100 billion a year. And then they sort of buried this lead of actually 500 billion right here. And so this is a magnitude larger of savings than the previous example, and they kind of held off on this until afterwards. So again, it feels slightly disingenuous on how they portray some of this information, but just wanted to highlight that this is a much more sizable chunk of that savings that he's potentially highlighting here.
Cost savings, they said. The two also championed the large-scale auditing of agencies, calling out the Pentagon for failing.
And on this side, failing 7 audits in a row sounds bad to me. I don't know what other scenario this would be okay. Like, for a taxpayer, if the IRS audited any of us, I don't think we'd be given 7 chances, or arguably 8. If they failed it 7 times and something hasn't happened yet, then arguably that's 8 chances. I don't really think we get more than 1, is my understanding. Maybe they're very generous and they give us a second chance after an audit to fix it, but 7 seems like a lot to me. And the fact that one of the government agencies is consistently failing audits does sound like a problem that we should be addressing.
Its 7th consecutive audit.
Musk here really has the opportunity to suggest to Trump that he makes cuts at federal agencies that could, in effect, directly impact how he does business. That includes the SEC, that includes the FAA and SpaceX launches, kind of cutting the red tape there, making it easier for them to launch without certain regulations and rules, including environmental protections. And then there's a National Highway Transportation Safety Administration. That is a big barrier for Musk's ambitions in robo-taxis.
The agency has been a strict watchdog when it comes to the safety of Tesla's vehicles.
This is a major recall Tesla is announcing after an investigation by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. Tesla is recalling 362,000 vehicles.
Tesla shares taking a leg lower late today after the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration found a critical safety gap in its autopilot system.
Meanwhile, testing standards for autonomous vehicles are done on a state-by-state basis, something Musk has said he would like to be standardized through a federal process, and Trump has said he will support.
Musk has said that he wants to get the DOT to instate a federal motor vehicle safety standard that would allow you basically like a super pass. You know, you just meet this one standard and then you can use your robotaxis anywhere in the country.
If Tesla can get a favorable environment around the government talking to the states about making some of these full self-driving more available, that can move the needle. Just to put some quick perspective on it, within a few years, there'll be about 10 million Teslas on the road. Half of them get it. That adds $6 billion in their net to their net income. That would increase it by about 35%. This is a huge lever.
Elon Musk has frequently blamed government regulation for stifling innovation.
A bonfire of nonsense regulations would be epic. Yeah.
More lax regulation could also help Musk's newer companies.
As far as what's going on with X and Twitter, that piece is that there's probably a benefit just around his ability to continue to grow that platform, just kind of in a more free speech type of world. And lastly, don't forget about X.AI. I mean, the whole AI piece, this potential around some regulation around AI that diminished today. And I'm stretched to try to find out how this could play out negative for Elon.
A weakened regulatory body might also bolster Musk's fight against the numerous probes and investigations he and his companies are facing from federal agencies.
There's somewhere in the ballpark of 19 or 20 federal probes and lawsuits involving Musk and federal agencies. There are OSHA investigations into safety issues at Tesla and SpaceX that are open. There's an EEOC civil rights investigation into Tesla. They believe that Tesla allowed racist discrimination and retaliation against Black employees to happen for years. The Labor Board is investigating SpaceX for possible alleged retaliation against employees who spoke critically of Musk with this open letter. Additionally, the SEC is investigating whether Elon and his brother have committed securities fraud. The EPA found SpaceX was in violation of the Clean Water Act in Texas, and he was livid about that, which delayed the Starship launches that he wanted to go forward with. And then you've got all the Department of Transportation safety probes. There are 4 open currently, looking into mostly safety defects around autopilot, FSD, and these partially automated driving systems that Tesla's had out on public roads. He's hoping that Trump will, force those agencies to wind down and abandon any probes, charges, litigation they were pursuing against him, against Tesla, against SpaceX, and so forth.
Finally, Trump is also likely to back Musk's anti-union stance. Here's the president-elect speaking to Musk during the 2-hour interview on X in August.
Well, you're the greatest cutter. I mean, I look at what you do. You walk in and you just say, you want to quit? They go on strike. I won't mention the name of the company, but they go on strike and you say, that's okay, you're all gone. You're all gone. So every one of you is gone.
There was a thought, going into after that big union contract was won with UAW following the strike, that might trickle over and bleed over into Tesla, that the UAW could convince Tesla workers to do the exact same thing and unionize for the first time. Now that the election has been decided in Trump's favor, a lot of the gas in that argument has been taken out.
Although Trump and Musk align on a number of strategies, it's unclear where Musk stands on Chinese tariffs, since he's changed his position in the past.
The Chinese car companies are the most competitive car companies in the world. Frankly, I think if there are not trade barriers established, they will pretty much demolish most other car companies in the world. Tesla competes quite well in the market in China with no tariffs and no differential support. In general, I'm in favor of no tariffs.
He's been very easy to criticize people home and abroad, except China, which is his biggest growth market outside the United States. Tesla's been producing more vehicles there, and he needs the Chinese Communist Party to like him.
One of Tesla's most productive factories is its Gigafactory in Shanghai, where they make cars and are also planning to make megapacks, these energy storage systems that are for, utilities or large-scale operations like businesses. They likely under a Trump administration won't be able to export those to the States.
While tariffs could help,
I think they did have a good example there of Elon kind of changing his opinion on tariffs. And again, they didn't really have much other detail as to what led to this change. I think that certainly is a valid point of concern, which is why is he switching his tactic? Because he clearly said in one stance, there's no way we're going to be able to survive if there aren't tariffs. And then another one said, we're doing very well without tariffs there. There's no reason to have these. And kind of speaking out against them. And so I do think that is certainly a valid point to be concerned about of what is leading to this shift. But again, I think generally speaking, people changing their opinion isn't necessarily a bad thing. Hopefully, all of us are learning over time, and as we get more and more informed, we're making better and better decisions. And so, on one side, I totally agree. I think for somebody who's supposed to be representing some portion of the government or has say over the government, usually want that individual to be able to stick to their guns in some way and be somebody that you can trust one way or the other. And from that standpoint, I think that's a very valid point to be making against Elon Musk. But I think on the other side, I'm sure people probably feel the same way on other situations. Like, I'm sure there's things that you disagree with as either things that Biden has done or things that Trump has done or their general parties, and that you probably wish that they would change their stance on something given information that you believe you have that they don't, or some information that you think is being undervalued. And so I think this is part of that trade-off where in some ways we do want people to be able to be held to a standard on when they say something, they follow through with it. But on the other side, we also want people to change their opinions that benefit us. And so, again, I think it was a valid point by them, but I think they should have included more information around like how that shifted. That would have probably made that a much stronger argument in my mind.
To help protect Tesla from Chinese competitors, such a move could lead to disruptions to Tesla's automotive supply chain. Though Tesla leads its competitors in the number of domestic parts it uses, the company still relies on some materials and parts from China. And Musk's other companies could also be affected by global tariffs.
A huge number of the AI chip tech that X Corp and XAI are using right now comes from NVIDIA, and NVIDIA's major manufacturing partner, TSMC, is based in Taiwan.
It's unclear if Trump's tariffs will apply specifically to TSMC, which is already investing in building out manufacturing plants in the US.
If and when a trade war, does break out again, Musk might stay out of it. It would behoove him to continue to stay out of any kind of Chinese-related politics, just like we see at companies like Apple and CEO Tim Cook there. They just kind of stay out of the conversation for fear of poking the bear because they're so dependent on those Chinese consumers buying their stuff.
Time will tell how effective Musk's foray into politics will be in influencing Trump and his decisions in the next administration. But one thing is for certain, Musk will remain a businessman above all.
I find that the best lens for understanding Elon Musk and the actions he takes at his companies has to do with opportunism. He takes advantage of whatever he thinks will make himself and his companies wealthier and more successful. So I don't know how much he and Trump are truly aligned, but they're mutually very useful at this time.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed what you saw, please hit like or subscribe. I will see you around.